are we integrating it? Because Intacct is completely on cloud and has an open API. So if there's a system out there that they might have built internally, if the company has their own technical services team, or as a system that doesn't have a marketplace connector yet, have you looked into building that? Can we build that for you? Do you have the internal resources that we can help out with? So we always push for automating as much as possible, because when you look at companies, they're not only on one system, right? You have your payroll system, you have your CRM, you have your expense reports, you have your main accounting system and your GL. So how can we integrate all these systems together, and have you kind of looked into that opportunity?
Welcome to the AI in Accounting podcast. Now, here's your host, Joshua Feinberg of Vic.ai.
So I am Joshua Feinberg from the AI and Accounting podcast, and I'm being joined today by Baran Sonmez from AcctTwo Shared Services in Houston. Baran, thanks so much for joining me today.
Of course, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So we're going to talk primarily about Sage Intacct, but before we shift gears, I always like to start out these interviews by understanding a little bit more about you and having you share with our viewers and our listeners a little bit more about your background. Did you always want to get into accounting? Is that what you studied in school? How did you end up in your current role at AcctTwo? What do you do at AcctTwo? What does it mean to be leading professional services?
Sure. I guess I'll do a little bit intro of AcctTwo first. We were founded in 2010. We're a value-added reseller for Sage Intacct. We solely implement Sage Intacct, so that's the only accounting system that we implement, and we get our expertise in. We have been Partner of the Year 6 years in a row. We have over 800 clients, and apart from implementing the product, we offer managed accounting services. So your company can outsource some sort of accounting, either the full package or maybe the payroll or accounts payable to us. And we provide a lot of technical services. So if you have some shortcomings in the system, you want to build something on the Intacct platform or integrate with your homegrown system, we can definitely help out on that front. And we focus on, lately our three verticals that we focus a lot on are SaaS, NFP, and home services. And switching gears back to me, I actually did finance and economics in college, Trinity University in San Antonio, and I was with PwC audit, and then decided that I didn't want to do audit for the rest of my life. So I switched gears and switched to the technical side. I've been with the company coming up on 8 years now. So kind of saw the company grow from 10, 20 employees to where it is today, over 100 people. So it's been a tremendous growth. I started implementing the product day in, day out, worked across different industries, and currently I'm the senior manager in the professional services. So I have a team of implementers that I'm working with that are focusing in a lot of industries. So definitely was not looking to do accounting at all to start with, but then kind of steered into that direction. I was always interested in technology and kind of stumbled into AcctTwo and Sage Intacct.
Is that where you first got exposure to Intacct while you're at AcctTwo already?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we have various employees that we implemented the product for. And then from going from an accounting role, they came into AcctTwo and became consultants and work with us. So we definitely see that switch a little bit of, once your accounting department goes through this change and likes the product, they want to get a little bit more of it. So
they end up, they're at a client site, they end up learning it, they love it so much, and instead of doing Sage Intacct as one of 5 things they do all day, they just want to do Sage Intacct all day long for a bunch of different companies.
Exactly. Instead of working on reconciliation hell and month-end closes, they're like, okay, I'm just gonna have fun with the product and figure out other people's problems.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Yep.
So when someone is brand new to Intacct, maybe they just joined AcctTwo and they've used maybe other accounting software before, or maybe they're a client that you're doing an implementation for and they've never used Intacct before. Where do you tell somebody that's new to Intacct to start first? What's your favorite tip for beginners?
I'm huge in shortcuts. So as much as we can automate and not touch our mouses, that I'm a big fan of that. Like when we were in PwC and working on all kind of Excel spreadsheets, they will always teach us all types of, 3-4 key macros and shortcuts to process faster. So I always recommend the shortcuts that you can use in Intacct. One cool one is through the date fields. So if you're in a date field in Intacct and you click the T button, as in today, it defaults to today's date. If you do plus or minus, it adds or subtracts a day. If you want to do the first day of the month, you click the M button as the first letter of the month word. And then if you want the last day of the month, you click the H. So I like those little date shortcuts that I always mention to people. And when you're trying to save or save new, like post a bill or post multiple bills, you have shortcuts to do Alt-S to save it and Alt-W to save it new. So if you're keying a bunch of transactions in the system, that definitely comes in handy. So those are a couple shortcuts that I always say when people are processing transactions day in, day out. Another one that I always like is whenever you're navigating in Sage Intacct, you have your list screens, and it's going to have, like if you're looking at your vendor list, you're going to see your vendor name, maybe their address, their ID, but they might not have information that you're looking for. Most of the list screens that you see in Intacct are very customizable. So you can create your own view. Maybe there's payment terms you want to see or credit limits for vendors on that screen. You can make them available. Or if you're looking at a big list of AP bills, what do you want to see that the default screen is not showing? So I always point people to the custom views direction so that you can kind of see what you want to see. And I guess the last thing for beginners that I always say to watch out for, especially if they're coming from not like a robust legacy accounting system, is that it's not going to be like Wild Wild West in Intacct. It's an AICPA endorsed software, so it's going to have rules in place. So for instance, if a cash is applied to a transaction for auditing purposes, you can't delete that transaction. Your legacy system might be allowing, things like that. Or if books are closed, there's specific people that have the security roles to reopen the books and book adjustments. Or if you want to book a adjustment entry, right, you have to be an admin user with a specific security to get into that. So those are probably the three things that I kind of tell people. One is to use the shortcuts, two is to create custom views, and three is to kind of keep in mind that there's going to be some restrictions in the system, and that's for kind of auditing purposes and make sure everything checks out at the end of the day.
Really fascinating to me to see what a long shelf life the idea of keyboard shortcuts has. Because I remember way back in the day when I was in college, first learning early Lotus 1-2-3. Pre-Windows, right before Windows started to get big, and keyboard shortcuts were huge. And they still lived on when Windows and the mouse and GUI and stuff like that came about. And then here we are in cloud, and we're on
it's all about shortcuts. Yeah.
We're about to step over in the era of autonomous accounting and using AI and machine learning, and still keyboard shortcuts are huge.
Yeah, it's funny because it carries over as well. So I remember some of the shortcuts from 8-10 years ago. They're not even popping up in Excel when you click Alt and then O and then it stops. But I know in my mind, if I put a CA, it's going to do the shortcut that I want it to do. So it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing that's lived on. So keyboard shortcuts, custom views, and then keep in mind that if you're used to using a more basic system, that there's going to be user roles that are there for the company's protection as a whole to prevent fishy stuff from going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes totally reasonable sense and great place for someone to start that's new. What about somebody that's at the other end of the usage spectrum that's been on Intacct for years? Maybe you met them at a conference like the Sage Partner Summit. Maybe you're talking to like a product manager from Intacct. What's your favorite tip for a power user that a lot of people may not know about?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. One thing I always recommend is, make sure you're utilizing the full system, right? Intacct comes with 8 dimensions and a bunch of user-defined dimensions that you can purchase. So make sure that you're utilizing all of them, because that ties into your reporting and dashboards. Sometimes if you're a beginner or a power user, you kind of get caught up in the day-to-day activities and forget to take a step back, because the main purpose of going through all the details, all the day-to-day activity, is to make sure that you have good reports, good numbers, and things that you can look into in your dashboard and make decisions in the future. So I always recommend users who haven't been too exposed to the reporting and dashboard tools to definitely take more interest, take classes, or sign up with partners to learn more so that they can build their own reports. Because dimensionality and reporting are, two key components of Intacct. It's very flexible. The financial report writer, from my perspective, is one of the most, strongest tools that Intacct has to offer. So if CFOs, controllers don't have too much exposure to dashboards and financial reports, I always point them to that direction. And because, once you look at a dashboard, you can see so much instead of digging through trial balances, running GL reports. If you have your performance cards that are popping up the numbers that matter for you, what is my gross profit month over month? Or if you're project-based company that you're doing projects for your main revenue source, what is my gross margin by project in a dashboard? What are my top 10 revenue customers on a dashboard? What's my cash balance, right? Month over month or week over week. So I always point them to utilize the reports and dashboards as much as possible. And I would probably say the third piece is if you have any outside systems, this can be your CRM, this can be your payroll, this can be operations system. Are we integrating it? Because Intacct is completely on cloud and has an open API. So if there's a system out there that they might have built internally, if the company has their own technical services team, or as a system that doesn't have a marketplace connector yet, have you looked into building that? Can we build that for you? Do you have the internal resources that we can help out with? So we always push for automating as much as possible, because when you look at companies, they're not only on one system, right? You have your payroll system, you have your CRM, you have your expense reports, you have your main accounting system and your GL. So how can we integrate all these systems together, and have you kind of looked into that opportunity? And I'll probably say the last thing is, are you keeping up with the system? Because Intacct has 4 releases a year. Every quarter there's a product release, and some are pretty substantial changes in the system. So you might be a user that's using Intacct, doing the same thing years and years. And if you're not keeping up with the changes that are coming up, you might be missing out on some really cool features.
So it's a combination of making sure that you take advantage of the dimensions to drive better reports and using the financial report writer, making sure that also flows through to your dashboards, thinking about your other systems within your company and what can be done with either native integrations, custom API work that you potentially would help with to eliminate duplicate work, and making sure that the systems are talking to each other, and then overall just keeping up with the pace of change on these quarterly releases.
Absolutely. That captures it pretty well.
Does any of, and on the professional services side, when you're onboarding a new client, how much of those 4 best practices come into play for what you're stepping them through and kind of thinking ahead to make sure you're working as efficiently as possible?
Yeah, so that's one of the first things that we look at is we take a look at their reporting. Because one of the first things that we design with the companies are, how do we want to structure your dimensions? Some of them are going to be pretty simple, like your customers and vendors and your employee dimension and your locations. But some might be more complicated, like what is a project for you? Are you doing jobs? There's a wildcard dimension called class. How can we use that class for your business? So we always take a look at the reporting structure and the reporting requirements that the companies have to drive those kind of dimension discussions. So those are really important and really upfront in our implementation processes, for sure.
Across the board, regardless of whether someone's new to Intacct or they've been using it for years, are there certain mistakes that you see happening a lot that you wish you could tell people ahead of time so they'd avoid some of those potholes?
Some of these, I would say implementation process-wise, even right before getting into Intacct, there are some mistakes that should be avoided. That's very controllable by the customer. I always say you might be an existing customer and just adding a new module, test. Like test till you break the system, because you're not going to get that opportunity once lights come on and things are up and running and you're live in the system. So that's one thing that we focus a lot on, either for existing clients that are getting a new module. Let's say, hey, we've been tracking inventory on our general ledger, but now we're getting an inventory process in place and we want to turn on inventory tracking in Intacct. That's great, but that's a huge effort because there's a huge business process when it comes to inventory because you need to be very specific. You can't sell inventory you don't have on hand. So a lot of customers that I work with in the home services industry work with inventory, and the processing is very important, the order of operations. You want to purchase, you want to, of course, process your purchasing transactions first before you can sell them. But then purchasing department might slow down the sales department because your technicians might be out there doing work day in, day out. So I always recommend testing as much as you can before jumping into a system. And related to that, most of the companies end up getting a sandbox environment, not only in the implementation process, but after the implementation process. So when in doubt, if you're doing something for the first time, definitely go to your Intacct sandbox environment. Do it, make sure everything looks right in your subledger and GL before processing it in Intacct. Because there are some things that you might do that can be pretty hairy to fix later on. So I always point them at the sandbox direction. And one thing that we always highlight is we always, deal with clients that are going through a change, and people tend to be resistant to change, right? I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been doing it the same way. Why would I change it? Just have an open mind that we can come up potentially with a better process that you've been doing for the last 10 years. So I always am pretty upfront with the clients that let's talk through your processes. What do you want to implement? And then come up with a solution that might be different than your existing one, but that we promise that it's going to save you a ton of time. So kind of don't stick with the old ways. Be open to new ways to process your business. And talking about being open, again, I mentioned a little bit on the API ecosystem. Be open to automation, right? If there are things that we can make life easier for you, be open to that. Let's work on it together.
So testing, and the first cousin of testing is using the sandbox, right? So
Yep.
so if you're going to make mistakes, skin your knee. It's it's in a controlled environment before it's either extremely difficult or impossible to correct. And then the second big theme is just being open both to change. Change is sometimes difficult. Everyone likes the old pair of sneakers.
Yep.
And being open to the benefits of connecting all of your systems together, open APIs.
And one thing to tie back to also dimensions as well, this is a great opportunity when you're changing the accounting system for the clients to clean up what they currently have. That chart of accounts that has 700 GL accounts, does it really need 700 GL accounts? Or are we using it that way because that's how it's been forever? So this is a great opportunity for people to leverage the dimensions, right? You might have 27 different fixed asset accounts, let's say per truck in your balance sheet. Well, you actually don't need that because warehouse is a dimension now. So you can have fixed assets and then your warehouse as your truck that depreciates over time. So we spend a lot of time in the front end of our projects to see how dimensions can help out the clients and simplify their chart of accounts. And not only chart of accounts, look at your other records, right? We don't want to do a garbage in, garbage out. We don't want to bring 7 customers that are actually one customer record, but got created 7 different times throughout the years. So that would be another kind of mistake / tip that I like to give to people that are kind of about to get on the system.
So it sounds like you have a little bit more upfront exploratory work, diagnostic, maybe audit work of poking around and seeing what's still relevant, but the upside of clearing out the clutter, simplifying, making everything faster, more efficient. It's like a no-brainer. It's like when you're moving an office or moving a home and like, hey, I haven't worn these clothes in 5 years, haven't accessed these paper files in 10 years. Yeah. Or like a server migration, right?
Yeah. Yep.
You're looking to just make things more efficient. So yeah, that makes total sense on the big mistakes to avoid. Final area I want to talk with you about today is to get your thoughts on where all of this is headed. If you had to put your product manager hat on for the next couple of minutes and think ahead 6, 12, 18, 24 months out from now, what do you think the world looks like for the clients that are a great fit for AcctTwo? How do you think AcctTwo's business model changes? How do you think Sage Intacct is going to adapt to all this? Where are we going?
Yeah, so there are two things that immediately come to my mind on that question. First one being, of course, automation, right? How can we save you time? Can we save you time on your day-to-day processing? Can we save you time on month-end close, reconciliations, integrating with other systems so there's not a lot of manual touch points? Whatever the area is, let's try to automate it as much as possible. The industry that I focus on a lot is home services. So it's a B2C business. And we built our own custom platform within Intacct platform to help clients. So one thing, for instance, that we do that is a little bit struggle in Intacct is customer refunds. When you're a B2C business, of course, there's going to be tons of refunds that are happening, especially if you're having hundreds of jobs that are happening day in, day out. So building an automation around how to refund Joshua faster because my technician was in his house and didn't do the work that he was supposed to do. That's one piece that we developed. And another piece, for instance, is deposits. When B2C businesses work with a lot of credit card processors, there's so much volume, so much refunding. How can we clean that up in Intacct, automate it so that it matches what the bank says in Intacct? So that's just an example of how we can automate the product. If you have an idea to automate processes in the system, we can develop it. You can develop it if you have the team. Intacct is a very flexible API, and they have a lot of investment on that front. So automation is key. That is automating within Intacct, building within Intacct, or just connecting to a third-party system that you have. That's been pretty key for us, and we're internally very invested on that front. And the second piece that I think about is kind of verticals automatically form themselves, right? There are some verticals that tend to steer towards a specific system. The three that we internally have been seeing lately are home services, non-for-profit, and SaaS. And once you work with these verticals day in, day out, and constantly getting more complex projects around these verticals, you automatically become experts in that industry and you can talk their language much easier. So I can definitely see firms that kind of find these verticals that there's a huge market for and then specialize on those areas, because you can then bring your own expertise to these implementations, to these clients, and talk their language.
So when you're doing a consultation, exploratory onboarding, and a CFO or controller is walking you through what they see as a vision, you could say, no, I've seen this already. We've done this with 15 other firms in the last 2 years, and every single one of them ended up going down this path. Let me save you from that. And you're just providing enormous value, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because, like I said, I've been focusing on the home services industry for the last 2-3 years, and we have now a pre-configured approach when we're working with home services clients. Of course, they have their own operational system that they're using that we work with called ServiceTitan. And we built the Intacct structure so that it supports the ecosystem. The chart of accounts is pre-configured. The workflows are pre-configured, because after working with 10, 20, 30 of these clients, we figured out what the best practice is so that we don't have to spend time trying to figure out how the home services industry specific business processes should work. We already know how they should, and we've already built those workflows into the system. So we can kind of save some time and headache, both for the client and us, and just offer those best practices up front and cut the implementation time and cut the kind of headache of the client trying to figure out what their processes are, what the best practices are. Because most of the value that you offer in these implementations are just pointing the client in the right direction and say, software can do this. There are a couple options. Here's our preference. Here's what's best practice. Here's what we've seen before, and it's been very successful. So those are probably the two kind of areas that I foresee automation and kind of firms excelling in verticals, and that sometimes naturally happens.
Seems like also the world getting more comfortable with collaborating virtually, remote would lend itself as well to that too, because if you're in a small second or third tier city somewhere in the US, the likelihood of finding an Intacct expert on the home services industry is probably relatively small. But as long as the company is comfortable working in the cloud, even if they're a single location, they can partner with a company like AcctTwo.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In terms of any follow-up questions that anyone has, if they're curious about anything you talked about today, Baran, where's the best place for somebody to interact with you, connect with you, learn more about AcctTwo? Is there any particular social media channels very helpful for that?
Yeah, we can. We're pretty active on social media. You can follow us on, LinkedIn. I would probably point people to that direction. But our website, you can visit. One thing that we're offering that we actually see as a huge benefit to existing clients that might have been on Intacct for 3, 4, 5 years, might have been implemented by us, maybe a different partner, or on Intacct, and they might not be happy, or they think they're not using the product to the fullest. We do business reviews with the clients to analyze their businesses, analyze their processes, and kind of recommend where we can improve. So you can definitely go to our website, AcctTwo.com, and reach out to us. We can reach back out to you, schedule some time, figure out what your problems are. So we're always open to work with new clients, always looking forward to expand our portfolio. So don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, if you have any frustrations, if you have any automation needs or any add-on modules that you're liking to see in Intacct, or if you just want to reach out and say, hey, am I doing this right? Am I using the product to the fullest? We're always happy to help.
Also, feel free to reach out to Baran and say, great podcast, learned so much. It's changed everything. Hey, we probably should talk to you at some point too about services. And the interesting part with these kinds of interviews is, yes, there's a release, but it's also entirely possible that you'll be at a conference 2 years from now and someone's going to say, hey, wait a second, I remember watching you on that podcast and you gave me this great tip on dimensions and reporting. Thank you. Can I buy you a beer?
Perfect. I'm always open for that too.
That's awesome. Well, Baran, thanks so much for joining me on our podcast today. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Joshua. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the AI in Accounting podcast. To subscribe and leave a review, check us out at blog.vic.ai or wherever you like to consume podcast episodes, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube.